Eternity, written by and audio recorded by Andrea Kohalmi. Preface. The cold spring breeze swept over my face, freezing each tear in place. I lay on the freshly cut grass, staring at the trees overhead as the sun peeked through the dense coverage of leaves and branches. My hopes and dreams were like the glimmer of sunlight, just a little too far out of reach from becoming a warm reality. Sitting up slowly, I glanced around and shuddered. This wasn't the type of place where a girlfriend and boyfriend should be hanging out together. "I miss you, Zach," I whispered as tears streamed down my face. The wind swirled around me, chilling my body to match the frigid emotions choking me. "I miss you so much," I cried. My body convulsed on each word. "I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. Only you." I turned to face him and kissed his headstone. Chapter 1. Getting Over It. "Mom, you've got to let me go." Her arms squeezed me tighter. "Can't breathe." "But I'm not going to see you for an eternity." "I'm just going away for a month. We have the phone, email. Final call for flight 1443, boarding at gate E2, Boston to London. Flight 1443, boarding at gate E2, Boston to London." The static-sounding airport announcement faded into the white noise around us. I didn't like the airport. No, that's not strong enough. I hated the airport. The rushing around, security checks, and waiting to board made my stomach sick. The repellent fluorescent lighting, generic gray walls, and blue carpets were enough to induce a panic attack. To make matters worse, my mom trapped me in an embrace that was trying its darndest to squeeze out my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. "I love you, Angie. I just want you to know how much I love you." I sighed. Her insanity was just grounded in fear. After Dad died almost a year ago, she kept us kids on a very tight leash. "I know, Mom. I love you too. More than anything." I hugged her back and gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. "I really need to go now, okay?" I looked into her eyes and we didn't need to say anything else. It was obvious. We were both scared, for different reasons, of course, but scared nonetheless. She was afraid of losing me. I was afraid of being alone and completely independent. This month-long trip to Great Britain was forcing me to face those fears, but I found it as exhilarating as it was scary. Besides, I was heading to college in the fall, so this trip was both a test run and a getaway from the depression that had been plaguing me. I handed my ticket to the woman at the gate. "Passport," she said in a very bored tone. "Angelica? Kiss?" Wince. I hated my first name. No, not hate. Despised it. "No," I snarled through clenched teeth. "Angelica." I obnoxiously exaggerated the pronunciation. To this day, I swore my mom was high on painkillers when she named me. Angel Kiss. If she had a sweet tooth at the time, my middle name would probably have been Food Cake. Looking at me like I was crazy, the attendant slowly handed the ticket stub and passport back to me. With a smug smirk, I glanced at my mom one last time and caught her shaking her head in embarrassment. I liked how my relatively shy side melted away over the past few months. The new edgier me liked to irritate people. Maybe it was a coping mechanism to help deal with the deaths of my dad and boyfriend, or maybe I was just growing up. Either way, it made me feel more mature. I smiled and waved to my mom. She blew a kiss and waved back. Turning around, I walked eagerly down the gate toward the plane. My uncurbed excitement helped me easily overcome my flight neighbor, a rather large man whose odor reeked of salami and bad beer. To my right was an empty seat. I hoped beyond hope it would stay that way. I wasn't in the mood to be sociable. I adjusted the headrest and wrapped myself in a pale blue fleece blanket covered in white fluffy clouds. The flight was scheduled for 11 p.m., but it felt much later. The preparations for the trip, my job, and the ride to the airport wore me out. I popped a sleeping pill and passed out before the plane backed out from the gate. A recurring childhood nightmare plagued my uneasy dreams. My high school's boisterous basketball team and cheerleaders headed out on a class field trip to a mansion in the country. Our yellow school bus wound through a dark forest along a barely visible single-lane road toward an intimidating fortress which sat regally atop a hill. We certainly weren't in Salem anymore. As the sun set on this cold fall day, we hopped off the bus and walked through the expansive, exquisitely manicured green grounds toward the arched doorway of the prestigious home. While my friends wandered around the first floor, my feet were pulled, as if by an unseen force, up a majestic, heart-shaped stairwell. Drawn to the top floor, I found myself wandering down a long, dimly lit corridor to a room in the corner tower. Curious, I walked across the dark room and onto the balcony. To my surprised horror, I watched helplessly as the yellow bus drove away without me. My futile screams were absorbed by the frigid gusts of wind flapping against my red and white pleated cheerleading skirt. Returning to the room, panic set in as I struggled to figure out how to get home. A soft scratching sound pulled my attention toward the room's door. Burning red eyes pierced the blackness. The creature's crimson gaze and brilliant white fangs glistened in a ray of moonlight shining across its face. Screaming like a horror movie queen, I ran to the balcony's edge. Knowing it trapped me, the wild animal-like figure laughed menacingly and crept toward me on the white stone veranda. The sound of the plane's engine humming and Salami Man snoring roused me from the nightmare. It was a miracle that I felt so comfortable. There usually wasn't any room on planes. Disoriented, I opened my eyes one by one and realized my head had slipped from the pillow. It was resting heavily on the stranger beside me. I gasped and bolted upright when I noticed a keepsake of drool on his navy blue t-shirt sleeve. I couldn't look in his eyes. Sorry, I managed to whisper virtually inaudibly. Obviously, that wouldn't suffice. This was going to be an excruciatingly long flight if I didn't apologize properly. My face burned in humiliation. Working up enough courage, I glanced at his face. Was all I could muster. My mind blanked. This 20-something deity met my gaze with a knowing smirk and a twinge of playfulness in his eyes, which sparkled in a bright blue hue like the waters of the Caribbean. His eyes were complemented by perfectly coiffed light brown wavy hair with golden highlights. The sides were trimmed a little shorter, but his hair teased me with a run your fingers through it if you dare style. Carved by a master sculptor, his rugged, chiseled face wore a kind expression. These thoughts raced through my head in a millisecond before I blurted, I'm sorry about using you as a pillow. My cheeks felt like an inferno raged just under my skin. His thoughtful stare hid an air of mischief, which lingered on his cheeks and mouth. His mouth. His full lips were luscious, too. His face seemed to register my instant infatuation because his smirk turned into a widespread grin. And I'm sorry for drooling all over your shirt. It was best to get the entire awkward introduction out of the way. Then I could close my eyes, ignore him for the rest of the flight, and pretend that it never happened. No worries. I've actually been waiting for you to wake up, his deep melodic voice assured, luring me like a magnet. He had a beautiful British accent. I'm a sucker for accents. They sound so exotic, and certainly better than anything spoken in a Massachusetts dialect where R's are non-existent. The flight's extremely boring, and I can't sleep on planes. His sincerity was endearing too. Me neither, I quipped. Sleeping pills do it for me. Great. Now he'll think I'm an addict. I rushed to explain. I'm not a druggie or anything, but I get nervous when I fly. My gaze shifted to his damp sleeve. On my face, the burn smoldered deeper. Really? It's not a problem, he said so reassuringly I couldn't help but believe him. So would you like to talk? I'll go mad waiting for another 2 hours until they bring my complimentary peanuts and half can of Coke. Soda and peanuts at night? Gross, I blurted. Are you more a milk and cookies type of girl? He teased with a sly smile curling the right side of his lips. So? He raised his eyebrows. Are you always this testy? Sorry, I muttered, horrified that I was being so rude to the kind and heart-stoppingly beautiful man. I'm just teasing. So, Angel, where are you going? I'm traveling through... Wait a second. How'd you know my name? Even in the dimly lit cabin, I could see his cheeks blush in embarrassment. Your boarding pass. You dug through my stuff? I accused. His sweet gaze diffused my anger, and I immediately felt guilty for jumping to conclusions. No, he responded slowly, reproachfully. You were already using me as your pillow. I had very few options to keep myself occupied. I counted the windows, overhead lights, and compartments before I saw your ticket sticking out of the bag. In case you're interested, there are 239 lights. Not interested. I was still peeved that he had read my name. Why did you call me Angel, though? I turned toward him, propping one knee on the seat so I could face him. Plain seats are not conducive to convenient conversations. I just figured a girl like you doesn't go by Angelica. That would be like calling Heidi Klum Brunhilde. His eyes twinkled playfully. I couldn't help but laugh. I felt so comfortable beside this godlike creature. I sat next to lots of cute, even hot-looking guys in high school, but none ever paid this much attention to me. This one was different. I'd never seen a man so strikingly handsome in my entire life. His face literally glowed as the moonlit illuminated it. Angel is a perfect name for you, he stated emphatically. And why's that? I asked, sensing a pickup line was about to follow. Your auburn hair glows with the golden highlights. It smells heavenly, by the way, like coconut. I love coconut, he admitted nervously as his eyes met mine. The soft overhead lights accentuated the soft pink blush of his cheeks. And your eyes, they sparkle like emeralds. And shaking my head vigorously, I held up my palm to interrupt him. I hated being complimented, even if it sounded like poetry spoken from the lips of a god. I was no angel. I was more like one of God's prototypes before the creation of the supermodels, an accident that got tossed into humanity's oops pile. It's easy to be an angel with the help of lots of makeup, I said flippantly. Let me guess, you don't like compliments, he asked sardonically. No, I don't like meaningless pickup lines, I hissed much more harshly than I intended. Smelly man grunted in his sleep and turned to the window. Don't you think it's a bit presumptuous to assume I was picking you up? He said for the first time, sounding a bit angry in response to my grouchy attitude. Could I get away with swiftly pressing my lips against his? Just a taste. God, I beg of you. I won't ask for anything else. If I can just see what it's like to kiss the lips of such a perfect work of human art. This uncharacteristically intense, animal-like thought made my cheeks flush again. I hated being so self-conscious. Sorry, I'm not used to having guys compliment me, I muttered, staring at the seat in front of me. Don't tell me that a gorgeous angel like you doesn't have a boyfriend to shower you with compliments. Ouch. Very touchy subject. Feeling guilty immediately for the lustful thoughts that preoccupied me just seconds ago, I didn't want to delve into a conversation about my very dead boyfriend. No. His happy demeanor quickly became smug. He seemed satisfied knowing I wasn't dating anyone. Regardless of his feelings on the matter, I had only recently damned the pain from Zach's death and didn't want to open the floodgates. This was going to be an uncomfortable ride if I didn't change the subject. Let's talk about something else. Religion, politics, I paused. Sex, I added nonchalantly. Maybe it was because he was gorgeous or just friendly, but this overly extroverted remark didn't make me feel awkward in the least bit. What? He was clearly taken aback by my forwardness. My ruse was working. Or women's lingerie. I find a good talk about 4 for $5 bargain granny panties always keeps a conversation interesting, I said completely matter-of-factly. The left corner of his lips curled upwards. We can talk about lingerie, he said in an impish tone, looking at me slyly through the corner of his eyes. If it's about yours. His voice carried the word yours, as if it was a wonderfully dirty word. A lustful chill shot down my spine. Funny, I said deadpan. I thought for a moment and felt a crack in the dam. You know, an old boyfriend said that to me once too. Old boyfriend, huh? His eyes glimmered. I sighed, recalling everything about Zach in a split second. He was perfect. We had a connection. I looked him straight in his eyes. You know, something beyond hormones and infatuation. I paused. I hadn't talked to anyone about my feelings in a very long time, yet I was completely comfortable pouring them out to this stranger. What happened? He asked cautiously. Tears choked the rest of my words. I looked away as one escaped my eyelashes and crawled down my cheek. Without hesitation, he wiped the tear away. His hand lingering on my face tenderly for just a moment, a calming warmth radiated through his touch. Closing my eyes, I turned away from him. My insides burned from the torturous pain to which I had only recently grown immune. A few months ago, I could have sworn my guts had been yanked from my body, stomped on, and then put back with everyone expecting me to operate functionally. I bottled everything then, every memory, every feeling, every word we ever spoke, so I could just grow numb to the pain. But I couldn't hold on to them anymore. My hands covered my eyes as if they could somehow block the rushing river. Tears streamed onto my white cotton blouse, making it look like it got caught in a rainstorm. In a flash, the handsome stranger wrapped his arms around me and pulled me against his chest. Stroking my hair gently with one hand, he held me close with the other, my big pillow, letting me cry and blubber all over him. Shh, shh, he said soothingly, sincerely. I know what you mean. I've been there too, quite recently actually. While I didn't think he realized how tragic my situation really was, the tone of his voice convinced me that he knew exactly how I felt. His tenderness felt like heaven on earth. Shh, angel. I could have sworn he whispered, shh, my angel. But maybe that was just wishful thinking on my part. Eventually, the tears subsided. I'm sure you think I'm totally nuts. Who would break down like that in front of a stranger? I asked rhetorically, wiping the dampness away with my sleeves. Salami man next to me interjected gruffly, Will you shut up already? I was stunned. First, by the fact that he woke up. Second, by my comforter's reaction. He reached across me blindingly fast and grabbed the corpulent man by the collar, snarling, Why don't you mind your own business? Draining any trace of blood. The salami man's petrified expression matched the pale white light of the moon which shone across his face. Like a wild animal, my champion backed down slowly, still glaring at the man, who wisely broke the stare down and turned to face the window. I couldn't make up my mind. Was my newfound friend a psycho? Or was I a psycho for feeling flattered? Somehow he seemed more like a protector than psychopath. Besides, now I was doubly awestruck. He was handsome and chivalrous. Impressive. The muscles in his face released their tension while he moved slowly past me and settled back into his seat. He hesitated for a moment, inches from my lips, and asked gingerly, "You okay?" The citrus sandalwood fragrance of his aftershave immediately captivated my senses, and my eyes closed automatically to soak in every bit of him. I nodded slowly, dazed by his very presence. His friendly expression returned with a big, toothy grin. "I almost forgot," he said, reaching into the pocket of the seat in front of him. "Weren't you saying something about nuts?" He winked and tossed a bag of airplane peanuts to me. I broke out in a pathetic girly giggle. Salami Man shifted in his seat, and I pictured him rolling his eyes. I was never the giggling type of girl, especially not in front of a guy. I also rarely dressed up in pretty clothes, wore makeup, or pretended to be someone I wasn't. This guy just made everything disappear. All my cares, all my self-awareness. Well, almost. A girl like me could never have a shot with a guy like him. That would be like one of Cinderella's ugly stepsisters landing Prince Charming. It didn't happen in fairy tales, and it definitely never happened in reality. As we settled back into our seats, he asked, "So where are you going?" "Around England." "By yourself?" I nodded. "It's a dangerous world out there for someone like you." "What do you mean, someone like me?" I demanded petulantly. "You're young, alone, and gorgeous. There are plenty of places you wouldn't want to be by yourself." I glared at him, shocked that I was being lectured about my carelessness, and that he thought that I was gorgeous. He paused pensively. I felt myself getting mad, but not at him. I was annoyed with myself for losing control. He was just being kind. I needed to be more sensitive and less stupid. Life is made up of choices. Each of us has the power to decide which path we take. I just don't want you to get hurt. He spoke as if he'd known me my whole life. "Promise you'll be careful?" His brutally honest genuineness was intoxicating, although I couldn't make sense out of why he cared about what happened to me. He reached for my hand. I met his gaze and replied softly, "I promise." Oddly enough, I meant it too. The minute our hands touched, wildfire ignited my body in the most wonderful way. More than an attraction, it felt like a drug pulsated from his fingertips through every inch of me. My hand jumped from his gentle grasp. I turned, gasping for air, shocked by the weird sensation. He looked at me tenderly. "Why is he so interested in me? Seriously! I'm freaking frumpy Cinderella minus the magic wardrobe change and the happy ending." "Sorry." It was the only word I could speak at the moment. My mind was incapacitated with thoughts of confusion, bliss, and longing. My thoughts drifted to a hypothetical future with this stranger. Love, marriage, children, and grandchildren. I wanted to be grown up so badly, and in many ways, I already was. The ordeals of the past year made me feel like I was 40. In losing my father, I switched roles with my mom. Combined with the horrific ending to my first and only love, I couldn't bear the pain. Shutting off the outside world was necessary to survive, to be responsible, to care. We were all mourning, but my family didn't understand the torture that rendered me useless every day. This trip saved me. I needed the distraction. I needed to get away, and they needed my depression to go away. Handsome guy's gaze tried to decipher my thoughts. I feigned a smile and leaned back. Reality just set in. Father, dead. Boyfriend, dead. Me? all alone in an unfamiliar country. Excuse me, miss? Somewhere in the middle of a very deep, empty dream, my body lurched back into the present. What? I asked groggily. The plane has landed. It's time to leave, the flight attendant's voice urged. May we assist you? No, I'll be okay. I pulled my long hair back into a low ponytail and grabbed my bag. Only as I got up to leave did I realize that he was gone. Feeling an immediate twinge of sadness, I sighed. It all seemed like a vivid dream. Who knows? Maybe it was. My grasp on reality wasn't too tight these days. Happy to be on solid ground, I mindlessly merged with the sea of people teeming in the terminal. A flurry of anxious people crowded the newsstands. A handsome man's face was plastered over the front page of every newspaper. He looked to be about 45 with rugged, tanned facial features and dark curly hair. His exotic light brown eyes shone with a greenish gold tint. The TVs hanging over an airport pub broadcast his face on every screen. Police are looking for the perpetrators of this heinous crime. Sir William Endymion X was a prominent figure in our country. His long distinguished lineage has come to an end. Investigators are trying to determine who will inherit his fortune and amassed real estate acquisitions worth a reported total of £100 million. Flashes of the murder popped into my mind. Blood trailed down a mansion's red-carpeted stairs through a massive entryway. I shuddered, trying to squelch the macabre thoughts. A vivid imagination got in the way of my reality fairly frequently. Walking toward the exit, I looked for the local bus, which would drop me off near my youth hostel in London. Excuse me, miss? My first reaction, fear, froze my feet to the ground. Who would stop me in the airport? Miss? The voice came from a short man trying desperately to keep up with my swift pace. Miss, are you Angelica? I sized him up from head to toe, trying to figure out whether or not I should trust him. I cautiously replied, yes. He smiled, relieved. Miss, there's a private car waiting to take you to your accommodations. For me? Yeah, right. I mean, who would have sent a car? Ignoring him, I walked toward the line of buses. The man's voice became frantic. Miss, there is a car waiting for you from a Mrs. Catherine Kiss. Mom, I should have known better. Sighing, I followed the man who was wearing a neat black suit with a pair of shiny black wingtips that matched the sheen on his bald head. Promise that you'll be careful. The plain stranger's words echoed in my head. I was trying to rationalize this situation, but in the pit of my stomach, something told me this ride was not right. Gut feeling versus rational thinking waged their never-ending war in my thoughts as I climbed into the sedan's back seat.